Victor Hale had been awake long enough for the city's lights to look like numbers instead of stars. From the 42nd floor, Chicago's skyline sat behind the glass like a framed asset, neat and distant. Inside Orion Financial, the executive corridor was darker than it should have been, lit by recessed lamps that made every painting gleam like a warning. A contract lay open on Victor's desk, its pages marked with red ink. The pen felt heavier than usual. The air felt stale despite the quiet rush of climate control. Somewhere far below, a printer coughed once, then stopped. The building settled into its night noises, a soft mechanical breathing that Victor had long ago learned to ignore. Then a sound cut clean through it. A giggle, not a ringtone, not a notification, not the clipped laughter of a late call. A baby's giggle, light and bright. The kind of sound that belonged in a kitchen at sunrise, not on an executive floor after midnight. Victor's hand paused above the paper. His eyes lifted toward the door, as if the corridor itself had spoken. He listened. The building gave him its usual answers. The faint hum of fluorescent lights, the distant elevator motor, a vent ticking as metal cooled. And then, again, that small musical laugh, closer now, slipping under the door like water. Victor stood. The chair rolled back with a soft squeak that sounded too loud in the empty office. He moved to the door and opened it. The corridor stretched both ways, clean and polished, the carpet dark as spilled coffee. No assistants, no analysts, no security detail, just stillness and the steady hum of money being made in silence. And there, in the middle of the hallway, was a baby, small enough that each movement looked like a decision. Blue pajamas with tiny elephants, dark curls that caught the ceiling light. One chubby hand reached, planted, then the other, dragging his body forward with determined concentration. He paused beside a potted plant near the elevator bank, as if considering the obstacle, then angled around it like he had places to be. Victor froze with his hand still on the door. His mind, usually filled with the next meeting, the next number, the next acquisition, went quiet. For a moment he could not connect what he was seeing to any rule he knew. Babies did not belong here. Babies did not crawl through a corridor lined with original art and locked doors. The baby looked up. Deep brown eyes met Victor's. A still moment hung between them. A thin thread stretched taut. Victor expected fear, crying, reaching for an adult who should have been there. Instead, the baby smiled, not careful, not polite. A full, gummy grin that softened the entire corridor, as if the building itself forgot what it was. The baby changed direction and crawled straight toward Victor's shoes. Victor should have stepped back, should have called security, should have done something that matched the title on his door. Instead, he lowered himself into a crouch. The baby reached him and wrapped tiny fingers around Victor's index finger with surprising strength. The grip was warm and trusting, like a promise given without understanding what it cost. The baby tugged, trying to pull himself up, wobbling with earnest effort. Victor's other hand steadied him without thought. His thumb brushed over the baby's knuckles. The skin was soft, the hand impossibly small. The baby made a pleased sound and leaned forward, grabbing Victor's tie. The fabric pulled. The knot shifted. A thin wrinkle formed across a tie that had never been allowed to wrinkle in public. Victor did not pull away. He watched the baby's face up close. The concentration, the delighted seriousness, the way he treated Victor's expensive tie as a toy meant only for joy. Something in Victor's chest cracked, not loudly, but enough to let air in. For a single breath, he was not an executive, not a man who could end careers with one sentence, not a name in magazines described as ruthless. He was simply a person kneeling in his own hallway while a baby held his finger as if it belonged there. Victor's voice came out lower than he expected, softer than it had been in years. "Where did you come from?" The baby answered with babbling syllables, grabbing the tie again with both hands and tugging harder. The knot slid a fraction more. Victor found himself smiling without permission, a faint shift at the corner of his mouth that felt unfamiliar on his face. A sudden sound from down the corridor shattered the fragile stillness. Footsteps, fast and uneven, followed by a sharp intake of breath that carried panic. A woman rounded the corner, moving like she had been running for her life. Her hair was pulled back, strands loose from sweat. Her uniform was plain, the kind Victor barely registered during the day. Her eyes were wide and wild, fixed on the baby, then flicking up to Victor with a terror that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with what he represented. She stopped so abruptly, her shoes squeaked on the polished floor. For a moment, she could not speak. Her chest rose and fell fast, as if words were too heavy to lift. Victor saw the baby's grip tighten on his finger as the child sensed her presence. Then the baby turned his head toward her and made a happy sound, as if introducing Victor like a prize he had found. The woman's gaze dropped to the baby, and relief hit her so hard her knees almost buckled. She moved forward quickly, hands already reaching, then faltered when she realized where she was, who she was standing in front of, what she had brought into this corridor. Her eyes darted to Victor's face, searching for anger, for accusation, for the kind of cold dismissal people like Victor were known for. Victor looked at her and saw something beyond the uniform, a grief pressed down like weight, exhaustion etched into the lines around her mouth, a kind of fear that did not come from a single bad night, but from a life trained to expect consequences. The baby tugged Victor's tie again, demanding attention, oblivious to the stakes. Victor eased his finger free and scooped the baby up with careful hands. The child settled against his arm as if it were normal, as if Victor were simply another adult in his small world. The baby patted Victor's collar, then tried to chew the end of the tie. Victor turned slightly toward the woman. His voice stayed calm. "I believe this is yours." The woman's hands closed around the baby with a desperate gentleness. She pulled him to her chest, pressing her cheek to his curls as if touching him proved he was real. The baby made a soft, satisfied sound and rested against her shoulder. Victor's gaze dropped briefly to the lanyard on her uniform. The plastic badge swung as she held her child, catching the corridor light. Brooks. The name hit Victor like a cold draft. He did not react outwardly. He had spent years training his face to be unreadable, but something inside him sharpened. A thin line drawn between this moment and a file he had never opened, a report he had never asked to see, a death he had never questioned. The woman shifted, as if bracing herself. Her lips parted, ready to apologize, to explain, to beg. Victor watched the badge sway once more, the letters clear and black against the white card, and he felt the hallway tighten around them. He did not yet know why that name mattered. He only knew it did, and he knew, with a certainty that settled into his bones, that whatever came next would not be contained by closed doors and quiet nights. The woman's mouth moved, but her voice stalled somewhere behind her teeth. She kept her baby tight against her shoulder, as if the corridor itself might reach for him. Victor watched her hands. They were shaking in small, stubborn tremors, the kind that came after adrenaline burned through the body and left only raw nerves behind. Her eyes flicked once toward the nearest security camera, then back to Victor, and he understood what she was really afraid of. Not him, what he could set in motion with one sentence. "It's late," Victor said, keeping his tone even. "You should get him home." The words landed like a lifeline and a warning at once. She swallowed, nodding too fast. "Thank you," she managed, the syllables thin and strained. "I thank you." Victor stepped back from the doorway to give her space. The carpet under her feet looked too clean for panic. The art on the walls looked too expensive to witness anything human. She hesitated, as if waiting for him to add a condition, to demand a report, to call someone in. Victor did none of it. She turned and moved down the corridor with quick, careful steps. The baby's small head bobbed against her shoulder. One hand reached out and patted her collarbone, as if reminding her he was still there. She didn't look back. Victor watched until she disappeared around the corner, then pulled his door closed with a soft click that sounded final. Inside, the office felt different, smaller, as if the air had shifted and refused to return to its previous arrangement. He walked back to his desk and looked at the contract he'd been bleeding red ink onto. The letters on the page blurred. He read a paragraph twice and absorbed none of it. His tie hung crooked. The knot sat slightly off-center, a subtle disruption that would have annoyed him earlier in the day. Now it felt like evidence that something had happened in this building that didn't belong in a quarterly report. Victor reached for his phone. A new email from the board glowed on the screen. Subject line about the merger timeline. The kind of message that usually snapped him back into focus with its simple demand for control. He didn't open it. Instead, he opened a blank email and typed a short message to Human Resources, fingers moving faster than his thoughts could catch. There are employees unaware of childcare assistance options. Improve visibility immediately. Provide direct contact and support. He stared at the words, then hit send before he could decide whether he meant them as policy or penance. He wrote a second email to facilities. Staff lounge lock on second floor requires immediate repair. Confirm completion. He paused over the send button, then added one more sentence. Document the fix and forward confirmation. When it was gone, he set the phone down and leaned back, listening to the office again. The building's hum returned, steady and indifferent, but Victor could still hear that giggle, like a bright thread running through the night. He stood and walked to the windows. Below, the city moved in slow patterns of light. Cars slid through intersections. A train traced a thin silver line in the distance. Somewhere out there, that woman was probably heading home with a baby she had tried to keep invisible. Somewhere out there, she was calculating how much trouble she was in, how close she had come to losing everything. Victor pressed his fingertips against the glass and let himself think a thought he usually rejected on contact. This shouldn't be normal. He turned away from the view and crossed to his laptop. The screen woke with a soft chime. He didn't open the contract again. He opened Orion's internal systems instead, the ones his assistants used for scheduling and staffing and personnel. He typed the last name from the badge, letters appearing like they had been waiting. Brooks. Several results surfaced. The first was the woman's employee profile, night shift cleaning staff. Lena Brooks. Hire date relatively recent. Department listed under contracted services, the kind of category executives often ignored because it didn't affect profit margins in any dramatic way. Victor clicked once, scanning quickly. Address. Emergency contact blank. Benefits status minimal. Everything about the file looked stripped down, like it had been kept deliberately simple. He leaned closer, eyes moving over the data the way he read a balance sheet when he didn't trust it. Then, he saw a second record. Marcus Brooks, maintenance technician, status, deceased. Victor's hand stopped on the trackpad. The office went still around him. He clicked. A photograph filled the corner of the screen. A young man standing outside the building in daylight, a genuine smile on his face, eyes squinting slightly against the sun. He looked like someone who belonged to the working spine of the place, the people who kept the lights running and the elevators moving and the air clean enough for executives to breathe without noticing. Victor felt a slow chill spread through his chest. Not fear exactly. Recognition without context. 2 years ago, the file said. Incident. Fall from ladder. Investigation closed. Victor scrolled. The documentation was thin. Too thin. A fatality in the building should have left a trail. Internal memos, insurance notices, safety reviews, some kind of procedural bruising. Instead, the report read like something that wanted to be forgotten. His eyes caught a line near the bottom. Case closed within 48 hours. Victor stared at it, mouth slightly open, as if reading it longer would change the number. He clicked into the attached incident report. A PDF opened, crisp and sterile. The language was the same language companies used to make tragedy feel like routine maintenance, routine lighting repair, extension ladder, working alone, loss of balance. Victor's jaw tightened. People didn't die at Orion because of loss of balance. Orion spent money to prevent balance from ever being required. Protocols, checklists, oversight. If a pen ran out of ink, someone signed a form about it. He scrolled again, looking for names. Witnesses. Supervisor. Follow-up. It was mostly blank. Victor sat back slowly, hands flat on the desk. His pulse had climbed without permission, quick and hard, as if his body had recognized a threat before his mind agreed to. He looked back at the photograph of Marcus Brooks, and then at Lena Brooks's profile in the other tab, her address, and the shift schedule listed like items on a spreadsheet. A baby, a mother working nights, a husband dead in an accident that had been sealed like a drawer. Victor closed the incident report and opened the general personnel database, searching deeper, widening the time frame. He told himself it was due diligence, the same curiosity he applied to every part of his company. He told himself he would look for consistency and then move on. But his fingers kept moving. He pulled up safety logs from that quarter. He pulled up internal communications around the date of the death. He searched for the last name in email archives and found almost nothing, as if the system itself had learned to swallow it. Victor's gaze shifted to the clock on his desk. Past midnight, he realized he hadn't eaten. He hadn't stood up. He hadn't checked the board's email. His world had narrowed to one file and one question that refused to sit quietly. If the death had been an accident, why did it look like someone had cleaned it? Victor's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't the board. A calendar reminder for the morning. A meeting about the merger. Another list of obligations. Victor stared at the notification until the screen dimmed. Then he reopened Marcus Brooks's report and read it again. Slower, with the attention he normally reserved for hostile takeovers. He didn't know yet what he was looking for, only that Daniel Reeves was still asleep somewhere, confident in a system that protected him. And Daniel Reeves didn't know Victor had just opened the wrong file. Morning arrived without apology. Victor walked into Orion's headquarters earlier than usual, the kind of early that made the lobby feel like a stage before actors stepped onto it. The marble floors were still damp from overnight cleaning, carrying a faint chemical bite that clung to the back of his throat. The security turnstiles blinked green as he passed. The guard greeted him by name, voice half awake. "Morning, Mr. Hale." Victor nodded and kept moving. His phone was silent for the first time in weeks, the world briefly holding its breath. On the executive floor, his office smelled like stale coffee and printer toner. He set his jacket over the chair and opened his laptop before he even sat down. The screen's glow threw sharp light across his hands, as he pulled up the incident report again. He didn't read it like a concerned executive now. He read it like an adversary. Date, time, location, 7th floor, Saturday. A fatal fall during routine lighting repair. Victor clicked into the attached safety checklist. The file was almost insulting in its simplicity. A handful of boxes checked. A single paragraph describing the event. 2 signatures at the bottom that made his eyes narrow. The safety inspector's name was there, printed neatly. The second signature was administrative. A closure stamp, bold and final. Closed within 48 hours. Victor's finger tapped the desk once. A dry sound in the quiet office. He opened another window and searched the company's internal compliance repository for fatality, widening the range to include the last 10 years. A list of incidents surfaced. Minor injuries, a broken wrist, a back strain, a slip in a wet stairwell. Nothing else. No other deaths. No other cases closed so quickly. No other report with this kind of procedural emptiness. He printed Marcus Brooks's incident report and the attached checklist, the printer humming to life with a mechanical whine. The pages slid out warm, smelling faintly of ink. Victor stacked them carefully, as if neatness could impose order on something that refused it. He turned to his second screen and opened the maintenance work order system, the one that tracked every bulb replaced and every elevator serviced. Marcus Brooks's name appeared in the logs. The work orders in the weeks before his death were normal at first glance. Fixtures, wiring, standard access requests. Then Victor noticed a pattern. Several late-night access logs for areas Marcus shouldn't have needed for routine maintenance, particularly on the floor where the finance leadership sat, the CFO's floor. Victor's gaze lingered on those entries. Access logged. Clearance granted. Timestamps tucked between late hours, when most people trusted the building to be quiet. He scrolled further back, searching for work orders linked to executive suite lighting. A few popped up. Most were assigned to a small pool of technicians. Marcus's name surfaced more than once. Victor leaned back, the chair creaking softly. He could almost see it now. A competent technician working in spaces where paperwork lay open, where numbers lived on screens, where a man like Daniel Reeves assumed no one without a title would ever look closely. Victor's phone buzzed once on the desk. A short vibration like a warning. A message from his assistant about the morning schedule. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the archive of finance approvals from that same period. It wasn't a place he usually lived. Daniel managed those details. Victor signed big decisions and let the machinery underneath run. He typed the year, then the month, then the account categories that mattered. Operational transfers, vendor payments, subsidiaries, lines and lines of transactions filled the screen. Most were ordinary. Some were deliberately boring, as if designed to lull a reader into trusting the flow. Victor zoomed in. There were transfers that didn't match the rhythm, small enough to hide, frequent enough to matter, the kind that looked like routine vendor payments until you asked what the vendor actually did. He clicked one, a subsidiary account, then another, then a third. The money moved like water through pipes built to confuse. Each time it shifted, it picked up a new name and left behind a new layer of plausible justification. Victor's stomach tightened. This wasn't the chaotic mess of incompetence. It was a structure, an architecture. His cursor hovered over the approval field. Approved by Daniel Reeves. Victor stared at Daniel's name until the letters stopped feeling like letters. Daniel was his right hand, his earliest ally, the man who had built Orion's financial discipline from the ground up, the man whose laugh filled boardrooms and whose handshake sealed deals. and Daniel's name was attached to a chain that felt like a trap. Victor opened the audit trail for one transfer, then another. He compared dates. He compared amounts. He compared destinations. A pattern began to show itself, not complete yet, but undeniable enough to raise the hairs along his forearms. He turned his head toward the window, as if the skyline could tell him whether he was becoming paranoid. Outside, the city moved in steady confidence. Inside, his office felt like it was tilting. Victor's eyes returned to the printed report on his desk. Marcus Brooks, accidental fall, closed within 48 hours. He imagined Marcus on a ladder under fluorescent lights, the hum of electricity overhead. He imagined him noticing a folder left open, a screen left unlocked, a name attached to a transfer that didn't belong. Victor felt anger flare, sharp and clean. Not anger at Daniel, yet anger at the way the system made it possible for a human death to be reduced to a stamp and a closure time. Anger at how easily he had accepted it, because it was easier not to see. He opened another document. This time, the company's safety investigation protocol. Fatalities required external review, formal interviews, a documented chain of custody for equipment, a mandatory waiting period before closure. Orion had written those rules to protect itself, so why weren't they here? He searched for Equipment Inspection Report. There was a line that said the ladder had been inspected afterward. No attachment. He searched for Witness Statement. Nothing. He searched for Photographs from Scene. Nothing. Victor's hand slid to the edge of the desk, fingers curling around the wood until his knuckles went pale. He could feel the grain beneath his skin, grounding him in the present. The emptiness wasn't an oversight, it was a decision. Victor stood and walked to the door, then stopped with his hand on the handle. The corridor outside was busy now, assistants moving with tablets, quiet voices carrying through polished space. Daniel Reeves would arrive soon, coffee in hand, ready to talk about the merger and the market and the future. Victor didn't want his face to betray him. He let his hand fall and returned to the desk. He pulled a fresh folder from the drawer and slid the printed reports inside. He added a sticky note with a simple phrase in black ink, 48 hours. He closed the folder and placed it in the bottom drawer, beneath contracts and presentations, beneath the official story that Orion sold itself every day. Then he opened a new spreadsheet and began copying the odd transfers into it, one by one, building a private map. The work was slow and quiet, the only sound the click of keys and the low hum of the server room somewhere deep in the building. In the hallway outside, the day gathered speed. In Victor's office, the past finally refused to stay buried. By late morning, Victor had built a quiet wall of numbers. His private spreadsheet sat on a second monitor, rows of transfers lined up like footprints in wet cement. Each entry carried the same clean signature. In the approval column, Daniel Reeves. The pattern wasn't complete yet, but it didn't need to be. Victor could feel intention in it, the way a chessboard suggests the player behind it. He saved the file with a neutral name and closed the screen. Not because he was done, but because Daniel was due upstairs any minute, and Victor could not afford to look like a man holding a match near gasoline. He slid the folder labeled with his sticky note deeper into the drawer. The metal rails whispered as it shut. The office door opened with a soft knock that barely waited for permission. Daniel Reeves stepped inside, wearing his usual calm, suit crisp, hair perfect, a paper cup of coffee in his hand. The smell of roasted beans and vanilla syrup reached Victor before Daniel's voice did. "Busy morning," Daniel said, smiling like nothing in the world could surprise him. The Tokyo team finally replied. "They're pushing back on the timeline." Victor's own coffee sat untouched, cold, the surface dull and lifeless. He kept his expression neutral and motioned toward the chair. "Sit," Victor said. "Quick question before we get into Tokyo." Daniel settled in with an easy confidence, crossing one ankle over the other. The chair didn't squeak for him the way it did for other people. It was as if the room had been designed to agree with him. Victor kept his voice casual, a tone he'd learned in negotiations when he wanted someone to speak without realizing they were being led. "Do you remember Marcus Brooks?" Victor asked. "Maintenance. 2 years ago." Daniel's smile stayed in place, but a fraction of a second passed, barely more than a blink, before he answered. "Brooks," Daniel repeated. "Name sounds familiar. Tragic accident, right? Why?" Victor watched Daniel's mouth as he spoke, the practiced ease of it. Victor also watched Daniel's fingers around the coffee cup. His grip tightened, just slightly, until the cardboard creased. "I came across the file," Victor said. "The investigation closed fast. 48 hours. Daniel exhaled as if Victor had asked about printer ink. "Workplace incidents happen," he said. "Safety signed off. Insurance did what they do. We moved on. That's how a company survives, Victor. We don't linger." Victor let the word linger anyway. 48 hours. Victor repeated, softer. Daniel's eyes lifted, sharp now, pinning Victor with a look that tried to be friendly and failed. "Is there something specific you're concerned about?" Daniel asked. Victor leaned back, letting the silence stretch long enough to feel awkward. The hum of the building filled it, steady and electric. "No," Victor said at last. "Just making sure we're clean going into the merger." Daniel's smile returned, but it was colder around the edges. "We are clean," he said. "We've always been clean." He stood before Victor could add anything else, as if ending the conversation was a choice he was making on purpose. "I'll see you in the meeting," Daniel said, and left without waiting for a response. The door shut with a gentle click that sounded too deliberate. Victor didn't move until he heard Daniel's footsteps fade down the hall. Then he stood and walked to the window, watching the city below. He felt a tightness in his chest that wasn't fear yet, but it was headed there. Daniel had paused. Daniel had tightened his grip. That was enough to confirm Victor's instincts. Not proof. Confirmation. Victor returned to his desk and hit the intercom. "Get Robert Fletcher up here," Victor told his assistant. "Facilities." 15 minutes later, Robert Fletcher entered the office carrying a tablet and wearing the exhausted look of a man who spent his life fixing problems other people pretended didn't exist. His tie was slightly crooked. His hands smelled faintly of metal and cleaning solvent. "Mr. Hale," Fletcher said, cautious. Victor gestured to the chair. "Sit. I'm reviewing old incident reports." "Marcus Brooks." Fletcher blinked, and something shifted in his posture. Not guilt, not grief. A defensive readiness, like a person bracing against a door, being pushed from the other side. "Terrible situation," Fletcher said. "Good worker. Hard on the team. Who was supervising that day?" Victor asked. "Nobody," Fletcher replied quickly. It was routine. Brooks was experienced. He was working alone. Victor kept his gaze steady. "And the ladder?" "Inspected afterward," Fletcher said. "No defects found. Sometimes people lose balance. It happens." As he spoke, Fletcher's fingers drummed against his knee in a tight rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. A nervous percussion that didn't match his words. Victor leaned forward slightly. "We have protocols," Victor said. "Fatalities trigger external review. Interviews, documentation. Where is it?" Fletcher's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "That would have been handled through HR and safety." Fletcher said. By the time I was back on site, everything was finalized. Finalized. The word tasted wrong. Victor watched Fletcher closely. Did anyone follow up with his widow? He asked. Fletcher hesitated. I'm not sure, he admitted. I didn't even realize she still worked here. Victor's eyes narrowed. She does. Fletcher's face softened just a fraction. That's rough, he said, and for a moment the man behind the title showed through. Victor pushed a little harder. Did anything feel off about it? Victor asked. At the time, Fletcher's eyes flicked toward the closed door, then back. His fingers stopped drumming. For a beat, Victor thought he might speak. Instead, Fletcher straightened his shoulders like a man choosing safety. No, he said. Everything that needed to be done was done. Victor let the silence sit between them again, heavy and charged. The air in the office felt warmer, the kind of warmth that came when a room held secrets. All right, Victor said finally. Thank you, Robert. Fletcher stood quickly, relief flashing across his face for a split second before it disappeared under professionalism. He left the office, the door closing behind him. Victor sat alone for a long moment, staring at the empty chair. 2 conversations, 2 rehearsed answers, 2 sets of nervous hands. He didn't have proof yet, but he had a shape, and that shape pointed toward the same place every time. The CFO's floor. Victor opened his spreadsheet again and scrolled through the transfers, then opened a fresh page on his laptop and began listing questions. Not for a board meeting or an audit, questions for a hunt. Who had authority to close the case that fast? Who had signed the final stamp? Who had benefited? His pen scratched across paper, the sound sharp in the quiet. Then his phone buzzed. A calendar alert for an afternoon meeting with Daniel. Victor stared at it until the screen dimmed again. In the glass reflection of the window, he barely recognized his own face. Not because it looked different, but because the man staring back looked like someone who had started a war inside his own company. Victor saved his documents, locked the drawer, and stood. He could still choose to stop, to close the file, to go back to mergers and markets and safe lies. He thought of the badge swinging in the executive corridor, the name printed in black, Brooks. He thought of how easily a death had been stamped shut. Victor picked up his jacket. The fabric felt heavier now, like it carried responsibility instead of status. He stepped out of his office and into the corridor, moving toward the finance floor with the calm of a man who had decided he would rather know the truth than keep his peace. Victor chose a place that didn't belong to Orion, a coffee shop downtown, all warm wood and scratched tables, where the air smelled like burnt sugar and steamed milk instead of disinfectant and quiet money. He arrived without a driver, without a security tail, wearing a coat plain enough to make him look like any other man, with a deadline. Sarah Mitchell was already there, seated in the back corner with her laptop closed and her eyes tracking the room. Mid-40s, sharp posture, hair pulled back tight. She didn't look like someone who asked permission. Victor slid into the chair across from her. The vinyl seat stuck briefly to his coat, making a soft, ripping sound as he settled. Sarah didn't offer small talk. "You're not here for a corporate audit," she said. "No," Victor replied. He placed a slim folder on the table between them. Sarah didn't reach for it yet. She looked at his face first, as if deciding whether he understood what he'd started. Victor kept his gaze steady. "Marcus Brooks," he said, "ruled accidental. It doesn't feel accidental." Sarah finally opened the folder. Her fingers moved quickly, efficient, flipping through the printed incident report, the thin checklist, The closure line that glared like an insult. Closed in 48 hours, she murmured. Victor watched her expression change, not shocked, not emotional, just alert, like someone who recognized a familiar pattern. You have more than a feeling, Sarah said. You have a contradiction. I have questions, Victor replied. And someone in my building doesn't want them asked. Sarah's eyes lifted. Who? Victor didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. He'd learned that names had weight, and weight could tip a room. Sarah nodded as if she had heard the silence and understood it. All right, she said. I'll tell you what I can do, and what it costs. Not money. Risk. Victor's jaw tightened. I'm aware. Sarah took out her phone, swiped once, and turned it face down on the table. A small gesture, but it changed the temperature of the conversation. I have a contact in the medical examiner's office, she said. They don't like being told what to write. Sometimes they keep notes. Victor's skin prickled. Can you get the report? I can get the report, Sarah said. And I can get the annotations that don't make it into the final story. She stood, not dramatically, just decisively. Give me 24 hours. Victor followed her out, the bell over the cafe door jingling as they separated. The street outside smelled like wet concrete and exhaust. The city moved around him, indifferent. Victor returned to Orion with his collar turned up against a wind that felt sharper than it should have. He kept his day normal. Meetings, calls, smiles that didn't reach his eyes. Daniel Reeves passed him twice in the hallway, each time with that smooth confidence that now looked like performance. By evening, Victor's head throbbed from restraint. His phone vibrated once, then again, then buzzed steadily. Sarah's name. Victor answered without speaking. Meet me, she said. Same place. Now, when he arrived, the coffee shop was quieter, the afternoon crowd gone. Sarah sat in the same back corner, but her laptop was open now, and her face had changed. The calm precision was still there, but underneath it was something tighter. She slid her laptop toward him. On the screen was a scanned document. The official autopsy report. Clean formatting. Clinical language. Cause of death, listed in neat terms that tried to make tragedy sound ordinary. Victor's eyes dropped to the conclusion, then moved up as Sarah tapped the trackpad, zooming in on a section near the middle. Look here, she said. A notation in the medical examiner's supplemental notes, not highlighted, not emphasized, but unmistakable once seen. Bruising patterns inconsistent with a simple fall. Possible restraint. Possible struggle. Victor felt his stomach drop as if the chair had been pulled out from under him. That's not an accident, he said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. Sarah's voice stayed flat, but her eyes were hard. The examiner flagged it for follow-up, she said. Requested further investigation. Victor's gaze snapped to her. And? Sarah clicked again. Another scan appeared. A request form. A stamp. A single line, scrawled across it, in a different hand. Override. Case closed. Victor stared at the stamp like it had burned into the screen. Who overrode it? He asked. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second page. Older paper. A printout with a name near the top. Assistant District Attorney Philip Warner, she said. He signed the override. Well, Victor's fingers curled around the edge of the table. The wood felt rough, anchoring him so he didn't lunge at the screen like he could strangle the name out of it. Where is he now? Victor asked. Promoted, Sarah said. Federal position. Public service salary. Private life. That doesn't match it. She slid a small set of photos across the table, property records. A vacation home on a white sand beach. A glossy listing image. The air conditioning in the cafe hummed softly, as if refusing to react to what they were saying. Florida, Sarah continued. Private school tuition. Second car. Nothing outrageous on its own, but combined with his income, it's a loud kind of quiet. Victor swallowed. His throat felt dry. You're saying he was paid, Victor said. That's my assessment, Sarah replied. Someone with resources wanted Marcus Brooks's death to stay tidy. Victor stared at the photos. A man's entire career bought for the price of a life. His mind flashed to the sterile incident report, the empty attachments, the missing documentation, the way everyone at Orion spoke about it like it was weather. It wasn't just the company, Victor said, the realization sliding into place. It went outside. Sarah nodded once. That's why I called you now. This isn't a workplace compliance issue. This is corruption, possibly homicide. And if you keep digging, whoever paid Warner will notice. Victor's pulse beat loud in his ears. He could feel it in his wrists, his throat, the base of his skull. The cafe around them blurred slightly at the edges, as if his brain had narrowed the world to what mattered. Sarah watched him carefully. You need to decide how far you're willing to go, she said, because once you commit, you don't get to half quit. You either expose it, or you become the next problem they solve. Victor's mind flicked to Lena Brooks's badge, to her hands shaking as she held her baby, to the way she'd looked at him like he was a judge with the power to erase her life. He thought of Marcus Brooks on a ladder, alone in a building that pretended to be safe. He thought of Daniel Reeves's pause, the crease in his coffee cup. Victor's voice came out low and steady. All the way, he said. Whatever it takes. Sarah didn't smile. She simply closed the laptop with a soft snap that sounded like a door shutting. Then we move smart, she said. No hero moves. No public gestures. We collect proof. We secure it. And we assume someone is watching. Victor nodded once. The city outside the cafe window kept moving, headlights sliding past like slow blades. In the reflection of the glass, Victor saw his own face, still composed, still expensive, still in control. But behind his eyes, something had changed. A case that had been stamped shut was open again, and somewhere, someone who had paid to bury the truth was about to feel the ground shift. Victor increased security without ever saying the real reason out loud. He called it merger precautions, a vague threat assessment, a recommendation from an outside consultant, words that sounded responsible enough to keep questions from forming. By that evening, extra guards stood near the elevators. New radios crackled at belts. The lobby cameras were checked twice instead of once. Even the air felt different in the building, heavier with vigilance, as if Orion's polished surfaces had learned to flinch. Victor made sure one instruction was delivered with particular clarity. Second floor, conference wing, night cleaning route. Pay attention. He didn't write her name. He didn't have to. He found Lena where he expected her, in a conference room that smelled faintly of glass cleaner and old coffee. The long table still carried ghost marks of last week's catered lunch. The overhead lights hummed softly, bleaching everything into quiet corporate gray. Elijah sat inside a portable playpen near the wall, stacking soft blocks with serious concentration. His cheeks were round, his hair still a little damp at the edges. Every now and then he paused and looked up, as if measuring the room's mood the way babies somehow could. Lena wiped fingerprints from the glass wall, shoulders tight under her uniform. When she saw Victor in the doorway, her body went rigid for half a second before she forced herself loose. Mr. Hale, she said, voice low, working late. It's becoming a habit, Victor replied. Her eyes flicked past him, catching the new guard posted at the corridor corner. So is that, she said. Victor stepped inside and let the door swing shut behind him, dampening the hallway noise. The room felt smaller now, sealed. We need to talk, he said. Lena's grip on the cloth tightened. About what? She asked, though her tone carried the knowledge that she already knew. Victor chose his words carefully, each one placed like a stepping stone. I found something, he said, and it's worse than I expected. Lena set the cloth down with slow control. She moved closer to the playpen, placing herself between Victor and Elijah without thinking. The gesture wasn't hostile. It was instinct. Worse how? She asked. Victor's throat felt dry. Marcus's autopsy notes were overridden, he said. There were signs of a struggle. Someone in the district attorney's office shut it down. Lena's face drained of color so fast, it looked like the lights had dimmed. She didn't speak at first. She stared at Victor, then at the floor, like her mind was trying to decide where to put the fear. Elijah dropped a block. It made a soft thud on the carpet, loud in the silence. Lena inhaled slowly through her nose. So, it wasn't just Orion, she said finally. It was outside. Victor nodded once. Her mouth tightened. A bitter laugh tried to escape and died halfway out. Of course it was, she whispered. Of course it was that big. Victor felt the urge to reach for her shoulder, to offer something physical. He kept his hands at his sides. This wasn't a moment that tolerated the wrong kind of comfort. I've hired an investigator, he said. She's building a case. But until we have proof secured, you and Elijah are exposed. Lena's eyes flicked to the playpen. Elijah had resumed stacking blocks, oblivious, his small fingers moving with faith. I've been exposed for 2 years, Lena said quietly. I just didn't know what to call it. Victor took a step closer, keeping his voice low. There are new guards in the building for a reason, he said. I need you to do something for me. Lena's gaze sharpened. What? Don't talk about this, Victor said. Not with your coworkers. Not with neighbors. Not even with anyone who feels safe. No one. And don't change your routine in obvious ways. Act like nothing has changed. Lena stared at him like he'd asked her to breathe underwater. How am I supposed to act normal? She said, voice trembling, when someone might have killed my husband and bribed the government to cover it up. Victor held her gaze. Because tonight is not about justice, he said. Tonight is about survival. Lena's hands shook now, not small tremors but visible ones she couldn't hide. She wrapped her arms around herself as if holding her body together. What do they want? She whispered. Victor didn't answer immediately. He didn't know the full shape of it yet, but he knew enough. They want silence, he said. They want the kind of fear that makes you stop asking questions. Lena swallowed hard. The muscles in her jaw flexed, fighting tears, fighting collapse. You said you could protect us, she said. Her voice was quiet but sharp, like a blade pulled slowly from its sheath. Can you? Victor's chest tightened. He could hear his own promise echoing back at him, the one he'd spoken before he understood what he was promising against. I'm doing everything I can, he said. And I'm not doing it alone anymore. But I need you with me. I need you careful. Lena's gaze dropped to Elijah again. He had built a small tower. It leaned slightly but held. He looked proud of it. He looked safe. Then he looked up, saw Victor, and smiled like they were friends. Victor felt something twist inside him. Lena noticed the smile. It softened her expression for a fraction of a second, before fear slammed it back into place. I can't do this, she said, voice breaking. I can't pretend. I can't sleep. I can't. You can, Victor said, and he surprised himself with the intensity in his voice. Because you already have, Lena blinked. Caught. You've survived grief that would flatten most people, Victor continued. You've worked nights, raised a baby, kept going when the world gave you no room to breathe. That's strength. That's discipline. That's survival. Lena's eyes glistened. She tried to look away, but Victor held the space steady. Elijah squealed suddenly, delighted by his own tower. The sound cut through the tension, like light through clouds. Lena's breath hitched. Her shoulders sagged as if her body had been waiting for permission to stop fighting for 1 second. She wiped at her cheek with the back of her wrist, angry at herself for needing to. What if something happens to me? She whispered. What if Elijah is left alone? Victor's voice dropped, quieter, more certain. Then he won't be alone, he said. He will be safe. He will be loved. You have my word. Lena studied his face as if searching for a lie she could cling to instead of trust. Her eyes moved over him slowly, measuring, testing. Victor didn't flinch. After a long moment, Lena nodded once. A small movement, but it felt like a door unlocking. Okay, she said. I'll be careful. Victor exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening slightly. Lena's gaze sharpened again. But listen to me, she said. Marcus wasn't reckless. He was careful. And still, he died. Victor's jaw tightened. I know. Lena stepped closer, voice low enough that even the room's hum couldn't steal it. If he was killed for what he knew, she said, whoever did it won't hesitate to do it again. Victor felt the truth of that settle into his bones. He glanced toward the door, toward the corridor beyond, toward the cameras and the guards and the illusion of control. I won't let them, he said. Lena didn't look convinced. She didn't need to be. Conviction wouldn't stop a bullet. Only strategy would. Elijah knocked his tower over and laughed, delighted by the collapse. The sound was innocent. It was also a reminder. Everything built could fall. Victor looked at the scattered blocks, then back at Lena. Starting tonight, he said, we don't move like victims. We move like people who know they're being watched. Lena's eyes held his, steady now through the fear. Then move, she said. And don't waste Marcus's death. Victor nodded once. Outside the room, a guard's radio crackled softly. A door opened somewhere down the corridor. Footsteps passed, then faded. Inside, Lena picked up a block and placed it back in Elijah's hand, giving her son something solid to hold. And Victor understood, with chilling clarity, that the safest lies were the ones told with calm voices, in clean rooms, right before someone decided to make silence permanent. Victor returned to his penthouse with a new habit. He checked the hallway before he unlocked the door. Not theatrically, not like a man playing at danger, but with the quiet caution of someone who had finally admitted he could be touched. The corridor outside his apartment smelled faintly of fresh paint and expensive air freshener. The building was too clean to feel safe. He slid his key into the lock and pushed the door open. At first glance, everything looked normal. The lights were off the way he'd left them. The city glow leaked in through the windows. The silence felt familiar. Then he saw the line of the study door. It wasn't fully closed. Victor stopped breathing for a beat. His pulse rose in a hard rush, loud in his ears. He kept his hand steady as he pushed the main door wider and stepped inside without turning on any lights. The soles of his shoes made no sound on the polished floor. The air smelled wrong, faintly metallic, like disturbed dust and cold electronics. He moved toward the study and paused in the doorway. Drawers hung open like broken mouths. Papers were scattered across the desk and carpet. A framed photo lay face down, the glass cracked at one corner. His laptop was gone. The folder with printed reports was gone. A second folder he'd hidden behind a row of books had been pulled out and left empty on the shelf, like a taunt. Victor stood very still, absorbing the scene with a cold clarity. This wasn't a burglary. Nothing else was taken. The watch box on the dresser in the adjacent room was untouched. The liquor cabinet remained closed. The art on the wall hadn't been disturbed. Someone had come for one thing: knowledge. Victor's phone felt heavy in his hand as he called building security. His voice stayed controlled, but his throat tightened around each word. "My apartment has been entered," he said. "Send someone now." He waited in the living room, back to the wall, eyes on the doorway, until the security team arrived. They moved through the space with professional efficiency, flashlights cutting pale beams across the dark. One of them spoke into a radio in short code phrases. Another checked windows and balcony access. Victor watched, and all he could think was how easy it had been, how fast. If someone could walk into his home, take his files, and vanish, they could do worse. And the people who would pay to bury a death would not hesitate to bury another. When the security supervisor finished his sweep, he spoke carefully. "No signs of forced entry," the man said. "Locks intact. It may have been a master key access." Victor's jaw tightened. "Then someone with privileges did this," he said. The supervisor hesitated, then nodded. "We'll review building logs. Cameras." Victor didn't bother answering. Whoever did this understood cameras better than the men holding flashlights. As soon as the security team cleared out to review footage, Victor called Sarah. She picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me," she said. "They were inside my apartment," Victor replied. "They took my laptop. They took the printed files." A pause. Then Sarah's voice sharpened. "Were you followed back from the office?" "I don't think so." "That doesn't matter," she said. "If they're inside your home, they're inside your life. They're telling you they know what you're doing." Victor's fingers tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. "Then we're close," he said. Sarah didn't disagree. "I'm coming," she said. "Do not touch anything else. Don't clean. Don't reorganize. Let it stay exactly how it is." Within an hour, Sarah stood in his study, scanning the room with a practiced eye. Her flashlight moved slowly over the carpet, the drawers, the edges of the desk. She crouched near the bookshelf and ran her fingers along the empty space where the folder had been. "This is targeted," she said, her voice calm in a way that made it more terrifying. "They didn't want valuables. They wanted to slow you down, or scare you off." Victor stared at the ransacked desk. "It's a warning," he said. "They're telling me to stop." Sarah's gaze lifted to his. "They're also telling you they have access," she said, "which means we assume compromised systems. We assume your home, your office, your staff, everything could be watched." Victor's chest rose and fell slowly. The air in the room felt colder now, as if the windows had cracked open. "What do we do?" Victor asked. Sarah straightened. "We move faster," she said, "and we stop keeping all eggs in any one basket." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You have something in mind." "I do," Sarah replied. "I have a contact. Former federal agent. White-collar specialist. He won't move unless the case is real. But if he looks at what we have, he'll understand the scale." Victor didn't hesitate. "Bring him in." Sarah watched him for a beat, as if measuring whether he meant it. "Once we pull that lever, it becomes a different game," she said. "If this reaches federal attention, Reeves will feel it. People like him have alarms." Victor's mind flicked to Daniel's calm smile. to the crease in his coffee cup, to the way his voice had turned cold around the word clean. Then let him feel it, Victor said. Sarah nodded once. All right, she said. But we secure Lena and the baby first. Victor's stomach tightened. He hated that Sarah had to say it. Hated that it was true. Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice. Victor, she said, if they're escalating to your home, they're not far from escalating to the people you care about. Victor's throat went dry. He looked out at the living room where the city's lights gleamed through the window. Distant and indifferent. I'll move them, he said. Tomorrow. Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted subtle. But Victor caught it. What? He asked. Sarah held the phone up. Unknown number, she said. It's not mine. It's yours. You need to worry about. As if summoned by the words, Victor's phone rang. Unknown number. The sound seemed to cut through the apartment like a wire snapping. Victor stared at the screen for a half-second, then answered, hello, static. Then, a voice, distorted, artificial, genderless, unhuman, carefully designed to be untraceable. Mr. Hale, the voice said. You're asking dangerous questions. Victor's grip tightened. Who is this? Someone offering you good advice, the voice replied. Walk away. Victor's pulse hammered in his throat. He kept his tone steady. I'm not walking away from a death that was covered up. A soft sound that might have been a laugh filtered through the distortion. Careful with words like death, the voice said. They have consequences. You're a smart man. You understand how reputations collapse, how companies collapse, how people collapse. Victor glanced at Sarah. She had gone still. Eyes locked on him, listening. The voice continued. Smooth and patient. You care about the cleaning woman, it said. And the baby. Victor's spine stiffened. That's admirable, the voice went on, almost gentle. But imagine what happens if their protector gets distracted. Imagine how fragile their lives are. Victor's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. You're threatening them, he said. I'm reminding you what you have to lose. The voice replied. Focus on your company. Forget Marcus Brooks. Ancient history doesn't concern you. Victor's voice dropped, sharp and cold. It concerns me when someone pays to bury the truth. A pause. Then the voice softened again, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Think carefully, it said. Because if you dig deeper, you may find the world digs back, and the baby will be the first thing buried. The line went dead. Victor stood frozen with the phone still pressed to his ear. The silence afterward louder than the threat itself. His heart pounded in his chest, wild and furious. Sarah's eyes were hard. That's escalation, she said quietly. They just made it personal. Victor lowered the phone slowly. His hands were shaking now, and he didn't bother hiding it. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for Lena, for Elijah, for the small life that had crawled into his world and cracked it open. Victor inhaled once, deep, forcing oxygen into lungs that felt too tight. Double security on her floors, he said, voice clipped. Tonight. Now. Sarah nodded, already moving. I'll call it in, she said. And I'll set the meeting with my contact. Victor stared at the scattered papers on his desk, at the empty spaces where evidence had been, at the cracked photo frame lying face down. The message was clear. They had been watching. They could reach him anywhere. And if he didn't stop, they would reach for a baby next. Victor's rage settled into something sharper than anger. Decision. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Sarah with steady fingers. They made contact. We move tomorrow. No delays. His send confirmation appeared like a small green light in the dark. Victor looked out over the city again. But the skyline no longer felt like a painting. It felt like a battlefield. And for the first time in his life, Victor understood what it meant to have something worth losing, which meant he finally understood what it meant to fight. Victor chose a room without windows, a small internal conference room on the executive floor, the kind used for sensitive negotiations. The air smelled like dry carpet and faint lemon polish. The overhead lights buzzed softly, and the table's glossy surface reflected every hand movement like a mirror that never forgot. Sarah arrived first, carrying a slim, hard case that clicked when she set it down. Victor watched her place it on the table with deliberate care, like it contained something fragile and explosive at the same time. "Before he gets here," Sarah said, "we lock the chain." Victor nodded. His mouth felt dry. He had lived his life around signatures, approvals, and plausible deniability. Now those same habits would either save them or bury them. Sarah opened the case. Inside were printed bank records, screenshots of audit trails, and a single USB drive in a clear evidence sleeve. The sleeve had a white label strip, blank and waiting. She slid a permanent marker across the table toward Victor. "Write it," she said. "Not poetic. Exact." Victor took the marker. His hand didn't shake, but his pulse beat hard in his wrist. He wrote on the label in block letters, "Orion Transfer Audit Export. Date and time. Collected by Sarah Mitchell. Delivered to Victor Hale." Sarah added her initials beside her name and circled the timestamp she had printed at the top of the export. The numbers stared back like a clock that couldn't be bribed. Victor sealed the sleeve. The adhesive strip made a soft tearing sound as it bonded, final and irreversible. A knock sounded at the door. Two knocks, then a pause, then another, spaced like someone trained to control their presence. Victor stood and opened it. Special Agent Marcus Chun stepped into the room with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked into 100 corporate buildings and never once been impressed by them. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, a suit that looked government-issued but well-maintained. He carried a small black bag and a thin folder that didn't bend. His gaze swept the room once, taking in Victor, Sarah, the hard case, the sealed evidence sleeve. Then it settled on Victor's face. "Mr. Hale," Agent Chun said. His voice was calm, but not casual. "Miss Mitchell." Victor closed the door and turned the lock. The click sounded too loud. Agent Chun set his bag down and pulled out a small digital recorder, placing it on the table with the same care Sarah had used with the evidence. He pressed a button. A red light blinked. "Time," the agent said, eyes on his watch. "State the time and location." Victor's throat tightened. This was the moment where belief stopped being private and became legal weight. 10:10 a.m., Victor said. "Orion Financial Headquarters. Executive Conference Room." Agent Chun nodded once, satisfied, and looked at Sarah. "Chain of custody." Sarah's voice stayed even as she outlined it. Who? When? Where? What was collected? How it was sealed? Her words were clean and procedural, stripping away emotion until the fact stood alone. Victor watched the agent's pen move across paper. The scratch of ink sounded like judgment being written in real time. Agent Chun opened the folder he'd brought and slid a form across the table. "Sign," he said. "Both of you." Victor signed. Sarah signed. The agent signed last. Then he stamped the page with a small metal stamp from his bag. The stamp landed with a hard, satisfying thud. Received. Victor felt something in his chest loosen slightly. Not relief. Alignment. The truth had a place to go now besides his own locked drawer. Agent Chun opened the evidence sleeve without tearing the seal, reading the label and comparing it to his notes. "Now," he said. "Walk me through it." Victor connected his laptop to the room's monitor. The screen lit up, throwing pale light across the table and painting their faces in the cold glow of spreadsheets and audit logs. Victor pulled up the transfer map he had built, the one he could now see clearly, like a body under a sheet, a network of subsidiary accounts, payments that looked routine in isolation, thousands of small transactions threaded together like a net. "Structuring," Sarah said quietly, keeping her voice minimal, factual. "Amounts designed to stay under internal alert thresholds." Agent Chun's eyes narrowed. "Under 10,000, he murmured. "Not asking, just confirming." Victor clicked a line item. An audit trail opened. "Approved by Daniel Reeves." Then another. "Approved by Daniel Reeves." It repeated with the patience of a machine that never felt guilt. Victor's jaw tightened. "It's been happening for years," he said. "At least 5. Agent Chun didn't react outwardly, but Victor saw the micro-shift in his gaze when he understood the scale. The agent looked at the approvals, then at the routing, then at the destination entities. "Shell structures," Chun said. "Layering." Victor clicked again, pulling up the medical examiner note Sarah had obtained. The scanned notation about bruising inconsistent with a fall. He didn't explain it. He let the words on the page do their own damage. Agent Chun leaned forward slightly, eyes tracking the line about possible restraint. His face didn't change, but the air in the room sharpened. Victor pulled up the override document next. The stamp. The signature. The clean, blunt word that had ended a life's questions. Override. Case closed. Agent Chun's pen paused. "Who is Philip Warner in your orbit?" the agent asked. "No direct relationship," Victor said. "But Daniel had relationships. Political fundraising. Legal connections." Agent Chun's eyes stayed on the document. "Warner is federal now," he said. "That complicates and clarifies at the same time." Victor's skin prickled. The reality of what he had set in motion pressed down on him like weight. Agent Chun looked up. "If this holds," he said, "it's not just corporate theft. It's obstruction. It's corruption. And it's a death that may have been staged." Victor heard the word staged and felt cold. It made Marcus's end feel less like tragedy and more like planning. Agent Chun sat back, hands flat on the table. "You understand what happens next," he said. "Search warrants, asset freezes, seizure of systems. Your stock price will react. Your board will react. Your name will be everywhere." Victor didn't look away. "Do it," he said. A brief silence filled the room, broken only by the recorder's faint hum and the building's distant ventilation. Agent Chun's gaze sharpened. "And the widow," he said. "Lena Brooks. Is she willing to cooperate?" Victor felt Lena's fear like a physical pressure. The way she'd wrapped herself around her child, the way she had asked for a promise she shouldn't have needed. "She's scared," Victor said. "But she'll testify if she knows her son will be safe." Agent Chun's mouth tightened slightly. "Witness protection protocols exist," he said. "They are not magic. If Reeves has reach, the most dangerous time is before we move." Victor's pulse thudded harder. He pictured a hand on a phone, a distorted voice, the word baby spoken like leverage. "What do you need from me?" Victor asked. "Full access," Chun said. "Financial systems, IT cooperation, security logs. And you act normal until we're ready. No dramatic board meetings, no accusations. If Reeves suspects federal involvement, evidence disappears." Victor thought of how fast his own evidence had disappeared from his apartment. He understood that kind of efficiency now. "How long?" Victor asked. "Days," Chun said. "Maybe a week." Victor's throat tightened. A week was a long time when someone had already demonstrated they could walk through locked doors. Agent Chun reached over and pressed stop on the recorder. The red light died. He stood. "Mr. Hale," he said, "what you're doing takes courage." Victor didn't feel courageous. He felt cornered by conscience. When Agent Chun left, Sarah remained seated, watching Victor as if she could see the war moving behind his eyes. "We delay your board meeting," she said. "We let the feds build the trap." Victor stared at the sealed evidence sleeve on the table, at the stamp on the receipt, at the timestamp that couldn't be negotiated. He nodded once. Outside the conference room, Orion's hallways looked the same, polished, quiet, safe. But Victor knew better now. The truth had been boxed, labeled, stamped, and officially received, which meant someone else, somewhere, would soon realize the ground beneath them was no longer stable. Night turned Orion into a hollow machine. The executive floor lights dimmed automatically after 9, leaving the corridors washed in a pale, nervous glow. The building's ventilation hummed like a distant engine. Every so often, an elevator chimed somewhere below, then fell silent again, as if even the steel was trying not to draw attention. Victor kept Lena and Elijah inside his office. The door was locked. A guard stood outside. Another waited near the private elevator. Their radios crackled in short bursts, soft enough not to wake the baby. Elijah slept on the couch, wrapped in a spare throw blanket Victor had pulled from a closet. His small breaths made the fabric rise and fall like a slow tide. Lena sat on the edge of the chair nearest him, shoulders rigid, eyes fixed on her son, as if watching could prevent the future. Sarah paced near the window with her phone pressed to her ear, listening to updates from Agent Chun. She kept her voice low, words clipped. Victor watched the hallway through the narrow glass panel in the office door. The world beyond looked the same as always, clean, controlled, corporate. But he could feel the lie under the polish. The plan was simple: hold until dawn. Let the arrests happen at first light. Keep everyone breathing until the federal team moved. Simple plans only worked in stories where villains respected timetables. At 1:16 a.m., the building's security system made a sound Victor had never noticed before. A soft beep. Then another. The kind of sound meant for operators, not executives. The guard outside his office leaned toward his radio. "Control, repeat," the guard murmured, voice tense. "Say that again." Victor's pulse tightened. He opened the door a crack, keeping his body between the hallway and the office. "What is it?" Victor asked. The guard's eyes flicked to him. "Stairwell access," he said quietly. 6th floor east stairwell door opened. No badge scan recorded. Sarah stopped pacing. Her head snapped up. "No scan," she repeated. Victor felt Lena behind him before he heard her move. She had stood silently, her hand hovering over Elijah, as if she could scoop him into her arms in one motion. Sarah stepped closer to the door, speaking into her phone. "Agent Chun, we have an unlogged access event in the building," she said. "Potential breach." The line crackled. Sarah's face tightened as she listened. Victor didn't wait for instructions. "Lock down the private elevator," he told the guard. "No movement on this floor unless I say." The guard nodded and relayed it into his radio. The office felt smaller suddenly, air thick with controlled panic. Victor turned to Lena. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp. "They're here," she whispered. Victor wanted to tell her no, wanted to insist it was a false alarm, an IT glitch, a harmless mistake. But he remembered his own apartment door slightly open. He remembered how easy it had been. Victor walked to his desk and opened the bottom drawer. He pulled out a small metal lockbox he kept for sensitive documents. Inside was a second phone burner, clean, and a slim flash drive sealed in a clear sleeve with a signed label. The kind of object that looked boring until it ruined someone's life. He set the lockbox on the desk and closed it gently. Sarah's voice sharpened as she ended her call. "Agent Chun says their teams are staged," she said. "But if Reeves has someone inside right now, it's to destroy what he can before dawn." Victor looked at the office door. The glass panel reflected faint corridor light, making the hallway look like a thin strip of water. Lena's voice came out low and steady. "He knows," she said. "Daniel knows it's coming." Sarah's eyes flicked to her. "What makes you say that?" Lena swallowed. "He used to know things before they happened," she said. "When Marcus was alive, Daniel would show up in the wrong place at the right time. Like he had eyes everywhere." Victor's jaw tightened. The radio crackled again. The guard outside spoke fast. Breath clipped. "Control reports motion on 7th floor corridor," the guard said. "Camera feed looping. They're seeing a repeating frame." Sarah froze. "Looping," she echoed, voice flat with dread. Victor felt the bottom drop out. A looping camera feed meant someone didn't just slip in. Someone controlled the building's vision. Someone wanted to move, unseen. Lena's hand slid under the blanket and found Elijah's foot, confirming he was still warm, still there. Her fingers trembled against his skin. Victor's brain moved fast. If cameras were compromised, their security was only as good as the men's eyes and the locks. "Bring the guard inside," Victor said. "We double in room." The guard stepped in and locked the door behind him. The office now held too many bodies, too much breath, too much tension. Sarah opened her hard case and pulled out a small device Victor recognized from earlier, an RF detector. She switched it on. The screen glowed, faint green. She swept the room in a slow arc. Nothing. No obvious bugs. That didn't mean they were safe. A soft sound drifted through the office door. So faint Victor almost imagined it. A whisper of fabric. A foot on carpet. Someone was in the corridor. Victor motioned everyone back with a raised hand. Sarah's body went still. The guard placed one hand near his holstered weapon, eyes fixed on the door. The footsteps paused outside. Then came a gentle knock, not the firm corporate knock of an assistant, not the aggressive pounding of security, a polite knock. Victor's blood ran cold. Another knock followed, slower, as if the person knew exactly how much time they had to terrify them. Lena pressed Elijah closer, lifting him without fully waking him. The baby made a small noise and settled again against her chest, trusting. Victor stepped toward the door, staying just out of view of the glass panel. "Who is it?" Victor called, keeping his voice steady. Silence. Then a voice, low and familiar through the door. "Victor." Daniel Reeves said softly. "Open the door." Lena's breath caught like a choke. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, her expression shifting from alarm to grim certainty. Daniel again, calm as ever. Even now, Victor didn't move. "This is inappropriate," he said. "Leave." Daniel's voice stayed smooth, almost amused. "You can't pretend you're surprised," he said. "You've been busy." Victor's throat tightened. "Get off my floor." A pause. Then Daniel's voice lowered, sharpened. "I saw the cameras," Daniel said. "Or at least, I saw what they wanted me to see. You've brought strangers into the company. You've been playing detective." Victor's mind raced. If Daniel was here, if cameras were looping, if a stairwell door opened without a badge, then the building was already compromised. Daniel continued, voice easy. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Open the door, Victor. We talk like partners." Victor's jaw clenched. "We're not partners," he said. The silence that followed felt heavy, like a switch being flipped. Then Daniel spoke again, and the softness was gone. "All right," he said. "Then listen." A faint metallic click came from the hallway. Victor recognized it instantly, a phone being placed on speaker. Daniel's voice returned, now framed by a hollow echo, as if he'd stepped back from the device. "I can be in your office," Daniel said. "Or I can be in her life." Lena's eyes snapped to Victor, terror bright and sharp. Her arms tightened around Elijah. Daniel's voice lowered to a controlled hiss. "You have 1 hour," he said. "Walk away. Hand over whatever you gave the feds. Cancel whatever you started. Or the baby suffers." The words landed like a physical blow. Victor felt rage surge, hot and blinding, then collapse into cold focus. He couldn't rush. He couldn't bargain. Daniel wanted panic. Panic made mistakes. Sarah leaned close to Victor, speaking without moving her lips. "He wants you to open the door," she whispered. "Don't." Victor nodded slightly, eyes fixed on the door. On the couch, Elijah's hand curled against Lena's collar, small fingers gripping fabric in sleep. Victor looked at that hand and made a decision that tasted like iron. He turned to Sarah and the guard. "Call Agent Chun," he murmured. "Now, quietly. Tell them Reeves is here. Cameras compromised." Sarah already had her phone in her hand, moving. Victor stepped closer to the door again, voice steady. "Daniel," Victor said, "if you touch them, it ends." Daniel laughed softly from the hallway. It was a sound without humor. "It already ended," Daniel said. "You just haven't accepted it yet." Victor kept his tone calm, the way he did in boardrooms when men tried to intimidate him with power they didn't actually have. "No," Victor said. The hallway went silent. Victor could almost hear Daniel thinking, because Daniel had overreached. He had come in person. He had spoken a threat out loud inside a building full of radios and guards, and federal eyes moving closer with every second. Victor's hands didn't shake as he slid his phone out and opened the secure messaging thread with Sarah. One line. "He's here. We have the threat. Move now." Victor stared at the locked door, the thin barrier between them and the man who had built his empire on hidden violence. Outside, somewhere in the building, a distant elevator chimed, closer than it should have been. Dawn was coming, and Daniel Reeves had stepped into the light. The knock never came again. Instead, the hallway outside Victor's office turned into a quiet holding cell. No footsteps, no voices, only the building's soft, mechanical breathing. Daniel had vanished the way he always did, leaving fear behind like a fingerprint. At 5:58 a.m., Victor's phone vibrated once. Sarah's eyes snapped to the screen. Before Victor even moved, she had been standing near the door all night, shoulders tight, gaze sharp, as if her stare alone could keep the walls from closing in. The message was short. "Teams moving." Victor didn't exhale. He couldn't afford relief yet. He watched Lena, who sat with Elijah pressed against her chest, rocking him with tiny motions that looked like prayer. At 6:03 a.m., the radio on the guard's shoulder crackled. "Unit 2, visual on Reeves," a voice said, clipped and controlled. "Lobby. Attempting exit. Hold." Victor's stomach tightened. Daniel had stayed in the building. He hadn't run into the city darkness. He had tried to leave clean, like nothing happened, like he still owned the air. A second voice cut in. "Federal present. Moving in." Then the building filled with a new sound, boot steps, fast and purposeful, echoing through the corridor. Not the slow corporate walk of executives. This was kinetic, practiced. The sound of people who didn't negotiate. Victor unlocked the office door, but didn't open it all the way. He watched through the crack as men in dark jackets moved past, flashlights sweeping, earpieces in place. One glanced at Victor and gave the smallest nod, the kind that meant, "Stay put." Minutes later, Agent Chun appeared, breath steady, face composed. "Mr. Hale," he said. His voice carried no drama, only procedure. "He's in custody." Victor's chest loosened slightly, like a belt notch released. Lena made a sound that wasn't a sob and wasn't a laugh, just air finally escaping after years underwater. Her eyes squeezed shut as she pressed her face into Elijah's hair. Agent Chun's gaze moved to her. "Miss Brooks," he said gently, "we need your statement this morning." Lena nodded without lifting her head. "Okay," she whispered. "I'm ready." Victor glanced past the agent into the corridor. The executive floor looked bruised by the presence of law enforcement. Open doors, radios, gloved hands, carrying evidence bags. Orion's polished world had been punctured, and the air felt different now, like truth had its own scent. Agent Chun extended a small card. "Direct line," he said. "If anyone approaches you, if you see anything, you call." Victor took it and placed it carefully on his desk, as if it were fragile. By mid-morning, the federal office felt colder than Orion ever had. Walls painted a tired beige, fluorescent lights that made everyone look washed out. The air smelled like old paper and stale coffee. Everything here was built to strip emotion away and leave only fact. Lena sat in the interview room with Elijah on her lap, turned slightly so his face wouldn't be fully visible to the camera. Victor waited outside, pacing in a narrow hallway that smelled like disinfectant. Agent Chun's recorder clicked on inside the room. Lena's voice drifted faintly through the door, steady, strained, honest. She spoke of Marcus's last weeks, his distracted silences, his late-night returns with the smell of ozone and dust in his clothes from ceiling fixtures. How he'd stood in their kitchen once, staring at his phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. She described the night before he died, how he'd held Elijah and whispered that he needed to do the right thing because the world didn't change unless someone risked something. When the interview ended, Lena came out looking smaller but lighter, as if she had handed over a boulder she'd been carrying in her ribs. Victor stepped toward her immediately and took Elijah without asking, letting her shoulders drop. "You did it," Victor said quietly. Lena's eyes were wet. "I said it out loud," she whispered. "I finally said it." Agent Chun joined them in the hallway. "Your testimony matches what we've recovered," he said. "Warner is cooperating. We've seized Orion's financial systems. We have enough to proceed." Lena's hand rose to her mouth. She closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, the grief was still there, but it had a new edge now. Justice didn't erase pain, it only gave it a place to stand. That afternoon, the news broke, not as a whisper, as a flood. Orion's CFO arrested, public official implicated, whistleblower death ruled suspicious. Federal agents execute warrants at corporate headquarters. Victor's phone began ringing and did not stop. Board members, lawyers, investors, media, people who had never cared about a maintenance technician now demanding commentary with polished voices. Victor ignored most of it, until one call made his jaw tighten. His assistant, voice tight. "Mr. Hale, reporters are at Lena Brooks's building. They found her." Victor felt heat flash behind his eyes. "Don't let her speak to them," he said. "Send security now." "I already did," his assistant replied. "But they're crowding the entrance." Victor was moving before the call ended. Sarah followed him out, her expression hard. Lena's apartment street looked like a swarm had landed. News vans lined the curb, cameras lifted like weapons. Microphones thrust forward as Victor's car pulled up. The air smelled like exhaust and wet pavement. Voices overlapped, hungry and sharp. "Mr. Hale? Was this about a cleaning woman? Are you involved? Did you cover this up until now?" Victor pushed through without speaking. Security formed a tight wall. Flash bulbs popped, momentarily blinding. Inside Lena's apartment, Elijah cried from overstimulation, his small body tense in Lena's arms. Lena looked pale and furious, as if the world had stolen her privacy as payment for telling the truth. Victor stepped close, lowering his voice. "Pack what you need," he said. "You're coming with me." Lena's eyes flashed. "Victor, not negotiable," he said, and he hated the authority in his own voice, but hated the danger more. "Not tonight." She stared at him for a long second, then nodded once, sharp and resigned. She moved fast, packing essentials with hands that still trembled. Diapers, bottles, a worn stuffed giraffe, clothes folded in a rush. Getting out was harder. Cameras surged. Questions flew. One reporter shouted something cruel about Marcus. Lena flinched as if slapped. Victor didn't look back. He got her into the car with Elijah and slammed the door like it was a shield. His penthouse, when they arrived, felt like a different planet. Quiet, secure, the city far below reduced to distant light. Lena stood at the entryway holding Elijah, staring at the clean lines and expensive emptiness. It wasn't awe on her face. It was disbelief, like she'd walked into a museum after a fire. "This is temporary," she said, defensive even now. "Yes," Victor replied gently. "Temporary." He led her down the hall to the guest room, where a crib had already been delivered and assembled. The sight of it, solid wood, clean sheets, made Lena's expression crack for a moment. Elijah quieted as soon as he saw the windows, pressing his small hands against the glass, fascinated by the lights outside. His breath fogged a tiny circle in the pane. Victor watched him, then glanced at Lena. "I'm sorry," Victor said, "that they found you, that this is what truth costs." Lena's eyes filled, but she blinked hard. "Marcus paid first," she said. Later, after Elijah finally slept, Lena stepped onto the terrace. The night air was cold and clean, carrying distant sirens like echoes of a war that had moved elsewhere. Victor joined her. They stood side by side without touching, close enough to share warmth. "It doesn't bring him back," Lena said softly. "No," Victor replied. Lena's gaze stayed on the city. "But it means he wasn't crazy," she whispered. "He wasn't reckless. He wasn't careless. He was right." Victor felt the words land in the quiet like a stamp. Lena turned her head slightly, her voice low. "I hated him for leaving me," she admitted, "for choosing danger when we had a baby. I told myself the world didn't deserve his courage." Victor looked at her profile, the way her breath turned faint in the cold. "And now," Victor asked, "careful, what do you tell yourself?" Lena swallowed. "That courage is the only reason Elijah has a future," she said. Inside, behind the glass, Elijah shifted in his sleep, one small hand curling as if still holding something. Victor's throat tightened. He didn't speak about love. He didn't speak about rescue. He didn't speak about what could happen next. He only stood there with her, letting the quiet hold them for once. When Lena finally went back inside, Victor stayed on the terrace alone. Far below, the city moved on, indifferent as ever. But in the guest room, a child slept safely for the first time in a long time. And in the air between steel and sky, one truth remained. No matter how polished the system was, it could still be forced to bleed. Victor's phone buzzed once more. A single message from Agent Chun. Sentencing won't undo it, but it will make it count. Victor stared at the lights until his eyes blurred. Then he whispered to the night, not as a vow for attention, but as a promise that didn't need an audience. Marcus Brooks mattered. In the guest room, Elijah's fingers tightened in his sleep, still gripping the fabric of his blanket like it was proof. Truth doesn't stay buried forever.